Greetings, beloveds. So, Shakti Temple Talks is back with another episode, and today we are going to be talking about the balance between discernment and surrender within our sexual experience. And so this is another area where we begin to alchemize our own inner masculine and feminine. This, I believe, if you're familiar with my work, you're probably already familiar with this. I am very passionate about harmonizing these forces because I believe the root of most of our suffering comes from the imbalance between these forces, first and foremost within us, and then that ripples out into our relationships and our experience of life and of the divine. So it's very important that we start to cultivate the virtues and the beautiful aspects of these two forces within us so that we get to experience more of them in the world and start to, through our own healing and reconciling of these forces, be a healing force for the planet, for humanity, and for all beings on this planet. So, surrender and discernment. I am going to attribute discernment to the masculine quality. Yeah, this ability to discern and this ability to protect and this ability to hold. The feminine is the ability to surrender, the ability to blossom open, the ability to expand beyond boundaries. And so these two forces are drawn to each other and are imperative for the other to fully express the highest aspects of discernment and the deepest aspects of surrender. So I want to talk about this a bit. So I think personally one of the most beautiful aspects of the human heart, the human body, the human consciousness is its ability to surrender, to open, to receive. And this is whether we are man or woman. I'm talking feminine quality here. This is in all of us. This exists in all of life. It's so beautiful. It's so sacred. It's so vulnerable. It's so tender. And this is what we are drawn to in the feminine. This is what attracts us and magnetizes us to the feminine, is her ability to open, her ability to surrender into the flow of life, into the flow of sexual energy, into the flow of ecstasy, but also into the flow of pain. If you've ever seen somebody who's so in the depths of emotion, even if it's a darker emotion like grief or even rage, when it is really total and full, it can be so alluring and so beautiful and so powerful. Yeah, when we go into these forces, when we really surrender, those moments we really surrender to the divine, some of the most beautiful experiences we will have as human beings are in these states of deep surrender. And also some of the most liberating moments we will ever have when we're clinging, and finally we let something go and all of a sudden life is just like frees up all this energy. It's a beautiful, beautiful force. But we have to learn how to wield our surrender with discernment. I really use this analogy a lot in my teachings, that, surrender, I think of the water element, and the feminine sexuality is very much akin to the water element. And it needs containment. Without a container, the water element loses its power, it loses its form, it loses its potency. It is the container that allows for that element to flow, to surrender, to open. And so this is where discernment comes in. We have to temper our surrender whether that's to a lover, to ourselves, to the divine, to life, to bliss, to whatever, we need to have proper discernment, or we end up hurting ourselves. So, especially in the realm of sex and sexuality, when we choose to surrender before we're ready, or to someone we don't fully trust, or a teacher who ends up being not clear in their energy, we end up getting hurt. And so it's so important. So if we think of surrender as this luscious feminine force that allows us some of the most beautiful experiences in all of existence, and I'm speaking again, this force exists in men and in women. It's not about man-woman, it's about masculine-feminine. We all have this ability to surrender ourselves. You know, it's like we're surrendering. Surrender, when I think of it, it's like we're taking this limited self and we're opening it into something so much larger. Yeah? So we all have this ability to surrender, to open ourselves, to be vulnerable, to reveal ourselves. But it is not always appropriate or healthy to just do that anytime, anywhere, and with anyone. So this is where we need to cultivate also that masculine force of discernment. That is our container. That ends up being the container for this feminine aspect, right? Our heart is a perfect example. You know, the heart, when we truly have an opened and surrendered heart, I think of Jesus on the cross. It's not necessarily a totally blissful experience. That's there, that's part of it, but there's also the feeling of the pain of the world that happens with the open and vulnerable heart. And so until we're really ready and have the capacity to hold that with that masculine presence, we want to have discernment with how much we are opening and letting in, because it can overwhelm our system. And so cultivating that discernment is the key to being able to open and deepen further and further. This is why if and when you're with a lover that you deeply, deeply trust, that you deeply, deeply feel held by, that you deeply, deeply feel safe with, the place you can go in that lovemaking is so much deeper, wider. Now, I understand that there can be the other side of that spectrum where sometimes it almost feels safer with somebody that you don't have that necessarily with, because they haven't seen particular aspects of yourself. And so it can sometimes be easier to deepen into that. And I think of that as more of an archetypal play, right? It's like we're able to see this person in a larger archetypal sense because we haven't had limited human as many limited human experiences with them. So it can happen in both. However, it tends to be more sustainable where there is actual established safety and trust. And so in that container of deep honor, of deep reverence, of deeply seeing and being seen, hearing and being heard, feeling and being felt, that container, we can open into the depths of our tenderness, of our vulnerability, of our surrender. And so I really believe that that's what we all crave. That's what we all are the most drawn to. When we think of it, yes, sex is pleasurable, but almost all of us are reaching for something deeper, whether we're conscious of it or not. And this level of surrender and experience of wholeness and totality and communion that we get to experience through that act is what we're really seeking. When we have proper discernment, when we've cultivated that masculine quality that acts as our guardian of this energy and of this experience, that acts as the container for this experience to really take place in totality and in the most beautiful way possible, it allows us to seek for this experience in a deeper way. Or to not just seek for this experience, but to actually have it. We might start having less sexual experiences, but the ones we'll have are of greater quality. As we cultivate our discernment to who we open ourselves to, who we surrender our bodies to. I mean, sex is the most intimate experience humans can have with one another. And so our discernment is who and how do we want to have this experience. And when we start to live by that guidance, we begin to move away from quantity and towards quality of connection. Because once we've tasted what that feels like to be in communion, where that masculine force of discernment and containment is there, and the ability to surrender so deeply, wholly, and completely is also there, that is the alchemy. That is the highest alchemy. That is what the tantrics were doing in India. That is what the Egyptian alchemists were doing. That is the sacred eros gamos, is when these two forces come together within one body, and then that is shared within the two bodies. And I imagine the Vesica Pisces symbol there, this wholeness comes together, and it just magnifies and amplifies and ends up being medicine for the whole, because of that deep honor and reverence and beauty and surrender and openness of the channel that is able to take place when these two ingredients are wholly, wholly there. So that is the importance of discernment, that masculine force, so that we can really deeply go into the deeper states that we are all truly yearning for in the experience of sex and sexuality.